What if I told you that some of the words you use the most when you pray are the very ones that push you further away from God? Have you ever stopped to think that you might be praying the right way with a sincere heart, but saying things that the Bible itself warns us to avoid? They're not curse words, they're not insults, they are common words, simple, but filled with spiritually dangerous habits. And the worst part, most of us learned to use them in church. Stay with me until the end, because today, as a Bible scholar with more than 30 years of experience, I'm going to show you the 6 words you should never say in prayer, and the biblical way to pray with truth, clarity, and real connection with God. When you begin your prayer with the word just, you may not realize the impact behind it, but instead of showing humility, you might be subtly reducing the weight of what you're asking for, like whispering the most important things into God's ear while doubting the greatness of what He can do. And that is exactly what can silently build a barrier between you and His living presence. The word sounds harmless, but it carries a softening in tone that, in prayer, can turn "I just ask for my family's health" into a trivial request, more like asking for permission than declaring faith, because the Bible invites us to pray with boldness and confidence, not with bargains. Linguistic studies on a pattern called Christianese show that common terms like just are often used in modern evangelical prayers and sermons to express sincerity, but they can also sound like self-justification or spiritual timidity. You, who are seeking more than memorized words, want to pray with power because you believe your God is greater. And when you replace just with something like "I trust and believe," you are not weakening your prayer, you are filling it with faith, and that changes the atmosphere. Because we already know that the heart who prays without fear receives real answers. And if you stay with me until the end, I'll share a powerful biblical word that taught me this deeply. Our next chapter will show what it really means to lift your hands in prayer and how that can transform the way you pray. So don't go anywhere. This journey is just beginning. Maybe you've never thought about this, but when you say, "Lord, be with me," or "be with my son" in prayer, you are, without realizing, asking for something He has already promised countless times He would never stop doing. And by repeating this request automatically, like filling a quiet space between two spiritual thoughts, you risk turning an eternal truth into a weak and redundant request, like forgetting that you're speaking to a God who already said in the book of Hebrews, chapter 13, verse 5, "I will never leave you nor forsake you." The problem here is not the intention, it's the habit. This phrase is so common in modern prayers that it has lost the weight of acknowledging God's presence. It became a spiritual filler, repeating what's already guaranteed. And that weakens intimacy with God, because instead of recognizing that He is there, you keep asking as if He's not. Concordia. Theology warns that using phrases like "be" within prayer shows a language pattern that sounds devotional, but actually expresses insecurity or spiritual distraction, something that can pull us away from a conscious practice of God's presence. And I understand you, because I've prayed like that for a long time too. And only after years of studying the Word and walking with people who struggled with feeling spiritually abandoned, did I realize the true path is not to repeat out of fear, but to recognize with gratitude. So try replacing "be with me" with something like "thank you for never leaving my side," and watch how the atmosphere of your prayer changes, how the heavens seem to open a little more, how your heart starts to believe what your mouth is saying. Now hold on to that thought, because the next point is even more curious. Why saying we are lifting someone in prayer can sound spiritual, but often is just a vague way of disconnecting from what we're really asking. And this is much more common than you think. Maybe you've never questioned the expression "lift up in prayer," because it sounds beautiful, devout, almost poetic, but that's exactly where the problem lies. Because even though it sounds full of faith, it is often empty of real intention. And when we say, "I lift up so-and-so in prayer," without thinking about what that really means, We are speaking words that pull us away from direct connection with God, like someone reciting lines without feeling, like tossing responsibility upward, hoping someone up there will take care of it. The Bible talks about lifting hands, lifting eyes, lifting the soul, and all these actions are tied to real surrender, a movement from the inside out. In the book of Psalms, chapter 25, verse 1, it says, "To you, O Lord, I lift up my soul." This shows that lifting is not just mentioning, it's offering something with the full weight of the heart. It's placing something before God, with a living expectation for His answer. Studies from Concordia Theology explain that expressions like lift up have become cliches in modern Christian vocabulary and are often used as spiritual shortcuts to avoid naming what is actually being asked for. Over the years, I've seen countless people pray, saying they were lifting up their children, their marriages, their finances, but when I asked what exactly they were asking God for, they couldn't answer. And that is what makes the prayer weak, not the word itself, but the lack of intention behind it. If you want your prayers to be answered, be clear, be direct, say the name, say what you need, say what you feel, because lifting something before God is like placing it in His hands with reverence, yes, but also with sincerity. And the more real you are, the more real His presence will become to you. And this brings us to one of the biggest mistakes we make without realizing, asking God not to lead us into temptation, as if He Himself could ever push us toward it. What you're about to discover now may completely change the way you see the Father who listens to you. This may be one of the most repeated phrases in Christian prayers around the world, especially in the context of the Lord's Prayer. But what many people don't realize is that by saying "do not lead us into temptation," we are unintentionally suggesting that God is someone who leads us toward evil, and that, besides being theologically controversial, is emotionally harmful for anyone trying to fully trust a good God. In the book of James, chapter 1, verse 13, it is written clearly, "Let no one say when he is tempted, I am being tempted by God. For God cannot be tempted by evil, and He Himself does not tempt anyone." That is why many modern scholars, including those in the Vatican and in Protestant academic circles, have suggested alternative translations like "do not let us fall into temptation" or "protect us in the time of trial," which better reflect the original Greek meaning of the word parasmos, a word that can mean both temptation and testing. Throughout my years studying the Bible in its original languages and analyzing ancient translations, I've realized that this misunderstood phrase has created a distorted image of God in the minds of many Christians, as if He is always on the edge of testing our loyalty, ready to throw us into a spiritual pit just to see if we survive. But that is not the God of Jesus. He is not the Father who sets traps. He is the one who runs to meet the prodigal son, the shepherd who leaves the 99 to find the one who is lost. By continuing to say that phrase without understanding, you may be reinforcing in your mind, and even in your spiritual subconscious, the fear that God is the problem, not the help. So start reformulating it. Start saying, "Lord, when the trial comes, be with me. When temptation comes, strengthen my spirit." And you'll see how that simple change brings a new kind of peace, because God has never been the one who pushes you into darkness. He is always the one who reaches out His hand. And speaking of words that push us away, what about the phrases of denial? Like when we say to God that, "No way." In the next chapter, we'll learn from Peter himself how misplaced words can put us directly against God's will, even when our intention is good. Have you ever caught yourself praying and deep down telling God that what He wants is not going to happen? Maybe not with those exact words, but with "I can't do that," or "this is too much for me," or even a silent "I'm not ready to change that now." Peter, one of Jesus' most impulsive and sincere disciples, made exactly that mistake. When he heard Jesus speak about His own death, Peter impulsively replied, "Never, Lord. This shall never happen to you." This is written in the book of Matthew, chapter 16, verse 22. And Jesus' response was shocking. "Get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me. You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns." This is in the book of Matthew, chapter 16, verse 23. That moment reveals something deep and uncomfortable, that even in prayer, even with faith, we can resist God's will with words filled with fear, control, and stubbornness, words that say no to His divine plan, even when our intention is to protect, to help, or to preserve something. As a Bible scholar, I've learned that many times the no's we say in prayer are not just rejections of pain, they are walls we build to stay in control of our faith and our comfort zone. And that becomes a real barrier to our spiritual transformation. When we say, "Lord, anything but this," we are, like Peter, trying to teach God how to act, forgetting that His wisdom is beyond our understanding. So next time you feel fear or resistance, try not to use words of denial, but say instead, "Help me to accept it, even if it hurts." Because that is the kind of prayer that makes room for the Spirit to work. And if you stay with me until the end, I'll show you how even silence can be more powerful than a rushed word. And since we're talking about the danger of saying too much, what happens when we say too much without saying anything at all? In the next chapter, you'll understand why empty repetition might be stopping your prayers from reaching heaven. There's a kind of prayer that looks beautiful on the outside, full of long phrases, fancy words, almost poetic vocabulary, but inside it's completely empty, disconnected from the soul, like a memorized script. And Jesus was very clear and direct about this. In the book of Matthew, chapter 6, verse 7, Jesus said, "And when you pray, do not use vain repetitions as the Gentiles do, for they think that they will be heard for their many words." This warning from Jesus wasn't against long prayers, but against prayers without soul, the kind that say a lot but mean nothing. Because when we speak without feeling, when we repeat phrases like "Lord, Lord," or "Bless, bless, bless," without knowing what we're asking, we risk turning prayer into a mechanical routine, not a real encounter with the living God. Throughout history, many theologians, from Augustine to Karl Barth, warned against this kind of automatic religiosity, where even prayer becomes performance, a ritual made to be seen by others. Jesus addressed this in the book of Matthew, chapter 6, verse 5. "And when you pray, do not be like the hypocrites, for they love to pray standing in the synagogues and on the street corners to be seen by others. Truly I tell you, they have received their reward in full." As someone who has studied spirituality for decades, I can tell you with confidence, God prefers a sincere sentence, even if it's confused, over a perfect prayer that doesn't come from the heart. And if there's anything that blocks the flow of the Spirit, it's the habit of repeating what others say, expecting God to respond to something you don't even understand yourself. Trade quantity for truth, trade repetition for revelation, and you'll see that prayer isn't about speaking beautifully, it's about opening your heart, even if all that comes out is a sigh, because the Holy Spirit understands even the silence when it comes from the soul. And before we close, I want to show you one last point, maybe the most serious of all, because there are words that not only push us away from God, but that reveal hidden pride, a need to be seen, admired, praised, ... And when that enters prayer, what should be an altar becomes a stage. Stay with me. Prayer was made to be a place of surrender, an altar of intimacy where the soul stands bare before God and says, "Here I am," no masks, no defenses, no performance. But unfortunately, for many, and it used to be me too, that secret space turns into a stage where we want to be seen, where words are chosen more to impress people than to touch God's heart. And Jesus spoke strongly about this in the book of Matthew, chapter 6, verse 5. "And when you pray, do not be like the hypocrites, for they love to pray standing in the synagogues and on the street corners to be seen by others. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward in full." This is one of the most uncomfortable verses for anyone who takes prayer seriously. because it forces us to look in the mirror and ask, am I praying to be heard or to be noticed? Over the years, I've realized that even the most beautiful words can carry vanity, like when we use complex terms, rehearsed speeches, or phrases that sound more like a sermon than a confession unto God. That's just noise. Prayer doesn't need to prove anything to anyone. It doesn't have to be theologically perfect or poetically crafted. It just needs to be true, simple, and full of surrender, like the prayer of the tax collector in the book of Luke, chapter 18, verse 13, who didn't even dare look up to heaven and simply said, God, have mercy on me, a sinner. Jesus said it was that man, not the eloquent Pharisee next to him, who went home justified. So if you feel your prayers have become an effort to sound strong, wise, or worthy, know that God is not looking for spiritual performers. He is seeking broken hearts, fragile voices, tired hands, people who pray like they're falling into the arms of a Father who understands everything before you even speak. And now that you've made it here, I want to keep my promise from the beginning. There is one word, one simple word, that completely changed my prayer life. It's not found in the great formal prayers of the Bible, but it carries the heart of them all. And I want to share it with you now as an invitation to a new way. Let's go to the end together. For many years, my prayer life was built on effort, carefully chosen words, beautiful phrases, requests filtered to avoid sounding needy, ungrateful, or like I was asking for too much. And still, many times, I felt a heavy silence, as if the heavens were closed, as if God was far away. Until one day, after much study, many tears, and deep frustration, I realized it wasn't the absence of answers, it was the absence of truth. That's when I discovered a simple but powerful word, a word that appears in several biblical prayers, but is rarely taught in theology classes or Sunday sermons. That word is, here I am. Abraham said it in the most difficult moment of his life, when God called him to offer his son. This is in the book of Genesis, chapter 22, verse 1. Moses said it in front of the burning bush when he was called to free his people. This is in the book of Exodus, chapter 3, verse 4. Isaiah said it when he heard God ask, whom shall I send? And he answered, here I am, send me. This is in the book of Isaiah, chapter 6, verse 8. This expression, so simple and so forgotten, sums up the heart of someone who isn't just asking, but surrendering. It doesn't say bless this or change that. It doesn't try to control what God will do. It simply offers itself present, willing, and whole. And since I started using it in my prayers, something changed deeply. I stopped struggling with words and started living in His presence. If you've come this far, I know you're looking for more than memorized prayers. You are searching for a real, living connection, one that transforms your inner life. That's why I want to invite you to continue this journey with me. In the ebook, Your 30 Steps from God, 30 steps, 30 days, 30 people who said, with their lives, here I am. Each story in that book is a mirror of your own, and I'm sure God will speak to you through every one of them. And if you want to keep growing, feeling and going deeper, the next video is for you. 7 common mistakes that block God's answer to your prayers. Click right here and let's take one more step together toward God's heart.